They tell us that holy ascension is not meant to be comfortable. They tell us that if you wish to fly, you must first survive the breaking of your human frame. I was 6 years old when I was brought to the Cathedral of Iron Feathers. For 20 years, I watched the elders walk these halls. They walked with a heavy, rhythmic limp. Their backs were bowed, hunched over by the massive, beautiful, terrible structures of iron growing from their spines. We were taught that we were the chosen ones, that our blood was holy, and because of our faith, the great architect was replacing our fragile, mortal bone with his eternal metal. Look at them, dozens of my brothers, standing in the dim candlelight of the cloisters, chanting hymns in a language none of us understand. From a distance they look magnificent, like statues of gods waiting to take flight. But if you get close, you smell it, the copper tang of fresh blood, the acrid, biting stench of orange rust. The skin around their shoulder blades is perpetually raw, weeping a blackish-red fluid where the metal tears through the dermis. For years, I prayed for my feathers to sprout. I wept with joy the morning I felt the first sharp itch beneath my skin, the morning I saw the first grey metallic point piercing through my flesh. I thought I was becoming an angel. I was a fool. Angels are supposed to be light, weightless, free. But as my wings grew, I didn't feel light. I felt heavy. I felt a pressure in the center of my chest, pulling me, dragging me. And as the pain became unbearable, I began to realize the truth. Our God does not want our souls. It wants our mass. The madness began to reveal itself in the little things. About a month ago, as my feathers grew thicker and heavier, the world around me began to behave strangely. I was eating in the refectory, lifting a heavy iron spoon to my mouth, when the spoon suddenly jerked to the side. It didn't fall. It hovered for a split second, pointing toward the eastern wall of the cathedral, before clattering to the floor. I looked around. No one else seemed to notice. They were too busy enduring their own agony. Then, it happened in the scriptorium. I was sharpening a quill with a small iron blade. I set the knife down on the wooden desk. Slowly, smoothly, as if pulled by an invisible thread, the knife began to slide across the wood. It fell off the edge of the desk, but it didn't drop straight down. It fell at an angle, flying toward the eastern wall and clattering against the stone. I retrieved a compass from the navigator's charts in the library. I held it in my shaking hands. The needle didn't point north. It spun wildly for a few seconds before locking violently toward the east, toward the heart of the cathedral, toward the high sanctuary, where only the high abbot is permitted to tread. And then there was the physical pull. Walking west, away from the sanctuary, felt like wading through deep, freezing water. Every step was a battle. My back arched, the iron feathers in my spine straining against my muscles, as if some invisible giant was standing in the east, holding a hook in my back, pulling me toward him. But walking east, walking toward the high sanctuary, it was effortless. It was as if the wind was at my back, pushing me, sucking me into the darkness. My brothers call this the calling. They say it is the pull of the divine. They say our souls are yearning for the altar. But I am a scholar. I have read the forbidden texts in the basement archives. I know the laws of the natural world. Souls are not pulled by physical force. Iron is. I decided that night. I was going to see what our God looked like. It was midnight when I crept out of my cell. The cathedral was silent, save for the rhythmic, agonizing groans of my sleeping brothers. Their iron feathers scraped against the stone floors of their cells as they tossed and turned in their sleep. The closer I got to the high sanctuary, the harder it was to stay on my feet. I didn't have to walk anymore. The iron in my back was being pulled so violently that I had to dig my bare heels into the stone floor just to keep from sprinting. My shoulders were screaming. The fresh metal feathers were tearing wider holes in my back as they were yanked toward the eastern doors. I reached the great iron doors of the sanctuary. They were 20 feet tall, forged from pure pig iron. I placed my hands on the handle. Usually, doors this heavy require 3 grown men to push. But as soon as I unlatched the heavy deadbolt, the doors flew open on their own. They swung inward with a deafening metallic boom, slamming against the interior walls. I was sucked inside. I fell to the floor, sliding across the smooth black stone. I desperately grabbed a crack in the floor to stop myself from sliding into the center of the room. I looked up, and my breath died in my throat. This was not a church. This was a silo. The room was a perfect circle, hundreds of feet wide. The walls were lined with copper coils, thick as tree trunks, glowing with a faint, nauseating purple light. Arcs of static electricity danced between the coils, crackling like dying stars. And in the center of the room was the pit, a bottomless, yawning abyss in the earth. Hovering directly over the pit, held in place by nothing but sheer, invisible force, was the god of the cathedral. It was a sphere, a massive, monolithic orb of polished black ore, easily 50 feet in diameter. It was spinning. Not fast, but slow, heavy, and silent. And with every rotation, the deep, sub-bass hum vibrated through my teeth, my skull, my very marrow. It was an electromagnet, an ancient, terrifying engine of unbelievable power. I crawled to the edge of the abyss and looked down. I expected to see a void. I expected to see hell. What I saw was infinitely worse. The pit was filled, piled high for hundreds of fathoms, were the rusted, twisted remains of every monk who had ever lived in this cathedral. I saw skeletons, their white bones crushed beneath the weight of their own iron feathers. The magnet was pulling them down, crushing the bodies at the bottom into a dense, compacted layer of organic sludge and scrap metal. The machine was feeding. It didn't care about our prayers. It didn't care about our hymns, our devotion, our purity. It was a mindless, metallic beast, and we were its magnets. The food we ate in the refectory, the bitter, metallic-tasting bread, and the dark water we were forced to drink. It wasn't holy. It was iron filings. We were being poisoned. We were being fed heavy metals so that our bodies would act as organic printers, growing the iron spikes out of our spines. We were being harvested. We were the fuel for a machine that had been running since before the dawn of man. I began to weep. The sheer, existential horror of it broke my mind. Generations of my brothers had died in agony, smiling, believing they were ascending to the heavens, when in reality, they were just jumping into a trash compactor. A shadow fell over me. I turned around. Standing at the doorway was the High Abbot. His iron wings were the largest I had ever seen. They were beautiful, arched like a peacock's tail, but they were so heavy he had to walk with 2 iron canes just to keep from being dragged face first into the pit. "You found it," the abbot whispered. His voice was like grinding gravel. "Abbot!" I screamed over the roar of the machine. "It's a machine. It's killing us. We have to tell the brothers. We have to stop eating the bread." The abbot looked at the giant black sphere. then back at me. Tears were running down his wrinkled cheeks. "I know," he said. My blood ran cold. "You know?" "I have known for 40 years, the abbot said, his voice trembling. "I found this place just as you did, when I was a young acolyte." "Then why do you let it continue?" I shrieked, my voice cracking. "Why are you letting them die?" The abbot looked down into the crushing dark of the pit. "Because, Silas, what is the alternative? To tell them the truth? To tell them that their pain is meaningless? That their lives are pointless? That there is no God waiting for them? Only a pile of rust in a dark hole? Hope is the only thing that keeps the pain from driving us mad. Let them have their heaven, Silas, even if it is made of iron." The abbot took one step too close. The magnetic field grabbed the massive weight of his wings. He didn't fall. He was hurled. The invisible force yanked him forward so fast his bones snapped before he even hit the edge. He didn't scream for help. In his final moments, as he plummeted into the abyss of scrap metal, he screamed a prayer. He died a lie. I stood up, backing away from the pit, but the force was growing. The machine was cycling up. The purple lights were blinding now. My own wings, the small jagged shards in my back, began to pull. It felt like 2 hot branding irons were buried in my shoulders, trying to rip my torso in half. My feet slipped on the smooth stone. I was being dragged toward the edge. I fell to my knees, clawing at the stone floor. My fingernails ripped off as I dragged myself away from the abyss, millimeter by millimeter. I reached the threshold of the giant iron doors. If I could just get outside the circle of the sanctuary, the stone walls might dampen the magnetic field. With a final, agonizing roar of pain and adrenaline, I threw myself through the doorway, using my own body weight to slam the heavy iron doors shut behind me. The doors latched. The noise of the machine was instantly muffled. The pulling stopped. I collapsed on the cold floor of the hallway, sobbing, my back bleeding profusely onto the stone. I survived the night. I am back in my cell now. Outside, the sun is beginning to rise. I can hear the bells ringing for the morning prayer. I can hear the shuffling, heavy footsteps of my brothers as they walk toward the refectory to eat their iron-laced bread. They are singing. They are happy. They believe today is the day they will fly. I look at the heavy iron hammer resting on my wooden table. I cannot let it grow. I cannot let the metal take root. If I want to live, I have to break them off. I have to smash the iron out of my own flesh. It will be agony. I might bleed to death right here on the floor of my cell. But as I lift the hammer, I hear the distant hum of the machine beneath the floorboards. It is patient. It is eternal. It doesn't care if I break my wings today, because it knows I still have iron in my blood. And eventually, everything returns to the earth.